Some relationships are built on attraction, others are built on compatibility. But the Scorpio woman and Scorpio man relationship is often built on recognition. It's the feeling of meeting someone who sees straight through you, someone who understands the things you never say out loud. The attraction can be magnetic, the loyalty can be unmatched. But when two people who guard their hearts so fiercely come together, the connection can become as transformative as it is destructive. Because sometimes the person who understands you the most is also the person most capable of hurting you. Scorpio woman, Scorpio man. Let's talk about it. Chapter 1, the recognition. One of the biggest misconceptions about Scorpio is that they are constantly searching for love. In reality, they are often searching for truth. They want to know who people really are beneath the image, the charm, the performance. Because of this, many Scorpios spend years feeling misunderstood. Most people only ever see fragments of them: the composed version, the polite version, the version that feels safe enough to show the world. But when a Scorpio woman meets a Scorpio man, something unusual happens. Recognition. Not because they are identical, but because they move through the world from a similar place. Each understands what it feels like to observe more than they reveal, to carry thoughts and emotions that never quite reach the surface, to instinctively protect an inner world until trust has been earned. Out of that shared instinct comes a strange sense of familiarity. She notices that he doesn't seem interested in impressing anyone. He notices that her calm exterior conceals something far deeper. Without realizing it, they begin studying one another, not in an obvious way. Scorpio rarely approaches people directly. Instead, they watch, they notice, collect information, pay attention to inconsistencies, observe reactions. They listen for what isn't being said. Most importantly, they catch what everyone else overlooks. That's why the connection between two Scorpios can feel so immediate. It isn't necessarily love at first sight, it's recognition at first sight, a quiet awareness that whispers, "You're not as simple as you appear." For two people who have spent much of their lives feeling unseen, that kind of recognition carries enormous weight. Because before the attraction, before the obsession, before the intimacy, there is a moment when both realize they may have finally met someone who speaks the same emotional language, and that's where the story begins. Chapter 2, the magnetic pull. Recognition is rarely where the story ends. For the Scorpio woman and Scorpio man, it is often where the fascination begins. Something about the connection lingers, a conversation that should have been forgotten isn't. A brief interaction continues replaying in the mind long after it has ended. A passing comment suddenly feels more significant than it should. Neither fully understands why. The thoughts simply refuse to go away. This is because Scorpio is not drawn to what is fully revealed. Scorpio is drawn to what remains hidden. And when two Scorpios meet, there's always something hidden. Layers beneath layers, questions beneath answers, depth beneath appearances. She senses there is more to him than he chooses to show. He senses the exact same thing about her, and so the attraction grows in an unusual way, not through certainty, but through curiosity. Most relationships grow through familiarity. Scorpio grows through mystery. The more there is to uncover, the stronger the pull becomes. What begins as simple interest slowly evolves into fascination. The Scorpio woman starts paying closer attention to his words. She notices the subtle shifts in his expression and wonders about the experiences that shaped him into who he is. Across from her, the Scorpio man becomes just as intrigued. He finds himself drawn to the emotions she conceals, the stories she never tells, and the parts of herself she keeps. The real attraction lies in what remains unseen. That creates a kind of tension that is difficult to explain to anyone else. The connection feels unfinished, incomplete, as though another layer is always waiting to be discovered. Because both are naturally private, easy answers never come. Every revelation is earned. Vulnerability arrives slowly. Truth carries more weight because it is never freely given. This is why the chemistry between two Scorpios can feel so powerful. It isn't built solely on attraction, but on discovery. The feeling that no matter how much you learn about the other person, there is still something deeper waiting beneath the surface. For Scorpio, there are few things more intoxicating than that because attraction may capture their attention, but mystery captures their soul. And by the time they realize how deeply they have become invested in one another, the pull is already far stronger than either of them intended. Chapter 3: The Unspoken Courtship. For most people, attraction is expressed through words. For Scorpio, it is often expressed through attention. Once Scorpio woman and Scorpio man become interested in one another, the relationship enters a stage that can be confusing to anyone watching from the outside. Very little appears to be happening, yet beneath the surface, everything is happening. Neither person is eager to confess their feelings. Neither wants to become emotionally exposed before they know where they stand. To Scorpio, vulnerability is precious. It isn't offered simply because attraction exists. It is earned through consistency, patience, and trust. So instead of rushing toward each other, they begin moving in circles. The conversations become a little longer. The eye contact lingers a little more. Small details are remembered. Questions become slightly more personal. Without realizing it, both people begin looking for evidence. Can I trust you? Do your words match your actions? Who are you when no one is watching? Scorpio rarely asks these questions directly. They observe. A person's character is revealed over time, and Scorpio is willing to wait. This is why their courtship often unfolds so differently from other signs. There may be long pauses between conversations, but the connection never truly disappears. Neither person mistakes silence for indifference. In fact, Scorpio often understands that silence has its own language. Sometimes it means caution, sometimes it means reflection, sometimes it simply means that emotions are growing faster than either person is prepared to admit. As trust slowly develops, something unexpected begins to happen. The masks become heavier to wear. The Scorpio woman finds herself wanting to reveal pieces of herself she normally keeps hidden. The Scorpio man begins lowering defenses he has spent years constructing. Not all at once, Scorpio rarely works that way. One truth, one conversation, one vulnerable moment at a time. This is the quiet beauty of a Scorpio and Scorpio courtship. It isn't built on grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It is built on countless small moments that slowly answer one question: is it finally safe to let someone see the real me? And when both people begin answering that question with yes, the relationship starts moving into a place very few people are ever allowed to enter. Chapter 4: The Emotional Safe House. For Scorpio, trust is never given all at once. It is built quietly, conversation by conversation, choice by choice, moment by moment. By the time the Scorpio woman and Scorpio man arrive here, Something important has already happened. The questions have become fewer. The uncertainty has softened. The constant need to analyze every word and every action slowly begins to disappear. Not because either person has become less observant, but because trust has started replacing suspicion. This is a turning point that many people never see. To the outside world, the relationship may not look very different. There are no dramatic announcements, no sudden transformation, yet beneath the surface, everything has changed. The Scorpio woman begins sharing stories she rarely tells anyone else. The Scorpio man admits fears he normally keeps hidden behind confidence and composure. They stop performing strength for one another. Instead, they begin revealing the places where they have been hurt. For many Scorpios, this is an unfamiliar experience. They are accustomed to being the one who listens, the one who understands, the one who carries emotional weight without asking anyone to carry theirs. But now they have found someone who doesn't flinch when the conversation becomes uncomfortable, someone who isn't frightened by grief, loss, regret, or the darker chapters of life that many people would rather avoid. Instead of changing the subject, the other Scorpio leans in, not out of curiosity, out of understanding. This is where the relationship begins to feel like home. Neither person feels the need to hide the parts of themselves they once believed were too much for others. Their intensity no longer has to be explained. Their silence no longer has to be defended. Their emotional depth no longer has to be translated. For perhaps the first time in a very long time, they experience something both have quietly wanted all along: the freedom to simply be themselves. This is why the Scorpio woman and Scorpio man relationship can become so difficult to walk away from. It is rare to find someone who accepts your light. It is even rarer to find someone who isn't afraid of your darkness. And once two Scorpios discover that kind of acceptance in each other, the bond often becomes far deeper than either of them ever expected. Chapter 5: The Power Struggle. The deeper the connection becomes, the more vulnerable both people become. And for Scorpio, vulnerability is never a casual experience. It is both the greatest gift they can offer and the greatest risk they can take. This is where the relationship begins to change. The Scorpio woman now knows how deeply the Scorpio man feels, even if he doesn't always show it. The Scorpio man has begun to understand the fears and insecurities the Scorpio woman rarely allows anyone else to see. They know each other, and with that knowledge comes influence, not the kind that is demanded, the kind that naturally exists when someone has been trusted with your heart. This is where many couples would simply ask for reassurance. Scorpio rarely works that way. Instead, they begin watching each other more carefully. A delayed reply, a shift in tone, a conversation that suddenly feels different. Neither Scorpio overlooks these moments. In fact, they often notice them before the other person realizes anything has changed. Most of the time, nothing is wrong. But Scorpio has an extraordinary ability to sense emotional shifts, and sometimes that sensitivity begins searching for problems that don't actually exist. Questions quietly form beneath the surface. Did I do something? Are they pulling away? Are they hiding something from me? Neither person wants to ask these questions. Doing so would require admitting fear. And fear is one of the hardest emotions for Scorpio to expose. So instead of speaking immediately, both may retreat into observation. They analyze, replay conversations, search for meaning in the smallest details. Ironically, two people who understand each other so deeply can begin misunderstanding each other through silence. Neither intends to create distance. Both are simply trying to protect themselves from being hurt. This is one of the great paradoxes of the Scorpio woman and Scorpio man relationship. Their greatest strength, the ability to perceive what others miss, can also become their greatest challenge because perception without communication leaves room for assumption. And assumptions have a way of growing larger in silence. The relationship has now reached a crossroads. Will they continue trying to read each other's minds, or will they begin saying the things both of them already know need to be said? The answer to that question often determines whether this relationship continues to deepen or begins pulling itself apart. Chapter 6: The Mirror Effect. There comes a point in every Scorpio woman and Scorpio man relationship when they stop seeing only the person in front of them. They begin seeing themselves. At first, this feels comforting. They recognize familiar habits, familiar fears, and familiar ways of navigating the world. They understand why the other hesitates before trusting, why certain subjects remain untouched, and why vulnerability is offered so cautiously. For perhaps the first time, they don't have to explain themselves. The other person already understands, but mirrors have a way of revealing more than we expect. Over time, the Scorpio woman begins recognizing parts of herself in the Scorpio man that she has never fully confronted: his tendency to withdraw, his reluctance to forgive, his instinct to protect himself before anyone else has the chance to hurt him. The Scorpio man experiences the same thing. He begins seeing his own emotional patterns reflected back through her: the walls, the suspicion, the need for certainty before surrender. What once felt familiar can suddenly feel uncomfortable, not because these qualities are new, because they have become impossible to ignore. It is often easier to recognize our own flaws in someone else than it is to acknowledge them within ourselves. And this is where the Scorpio relationship becomes profoundly transformative. The other person is no longer just a partner, they become a mirror. Every unresolved wound, defense mechanism, fear that has quietly shaped the way they love, it all rises to the surface. Some couples reach this moment and mistake it for incompatibility. In reality, they are experiencing something far more difficult: growth. Because the Scorpio woman cannot ask the Scorpio man to lower his walls if she refuses to lower her own. The Scorpio man cannot ask the Scorpio woman to trust him completely if he is still withholding pieces of himself. Each person begins realizing that the qualities they want from the other are often the very qualities they must first cultivate within themselves. This is why the Scorpio woman and Scorpio man relationship can feel so life-changing. It doesn't simply ask them to love another person, it asks them to confront themselves. And that may be the greatest challenge Scorpio ever faces, because facing another person's darkness is difficult. Facing your own is something else entirely. Chapter 7: The Battle of Silence. When most couples are hurt, someone usually speaks first. One person reaches out, asks what went wrong, breaks the silence. When two Scorpios are involved, that moment can take much longer to arrive, not because they no longer care. Quite the opposite. The deeper the wound, the quieter they often become. Scorpio has a tendency to process emotions internally before sharing them with anyone else. They retreat into their own thoughts, replay conversations, search for meaning, and attempt to understand what happened before saying a word. When only one Scorpio does this, the relationship usually finds its balance again. When both do it at the same time, silence begins speaking for them. Days pass. Neither reaches out. Both wonder if the other is thinking the same things they are. Both want reassurance. Both hesitate. Pride is often blamed for this dynamic, but pride is only part of the story. More often, it is fear. The fear of reaching out and finding the other person has already emotionally left, of exposing a wound that may not be received with the same care it was offered. The fear of discovering that the connection doesn't mean as much to the other person as it does to them, so they wait. The Scorpio woman tells herself she'll give him space. The Scorpio man tells himself he'll reach out tomorrow. Tomorrow becomes another day and another. Ironically, both people may be missing each other with equal intensity, while each assumes the silence means something entirely different. This is where misunderstanding quietly grows. Both are waiting for evidence that it's still safe to be vulnerable. The tragedy is that neither realizes the other is fighting the very same battle. Yet this chapter doesn't have to end in distance. When one Scorpio finally chooses honesty over assumption, something remarkable often happens. The silence breaks, the walls begin to lower, and both discover that the conversation they feared most was never the thing that threatened the relationship. The silence was. Because no matter how deeply two people understand each other, no one can hear the words that are never spoken. Chapter 8, the relationship nobody else understands. If the Scorpio woman and Scorpio man make it through the silence, they often discover something few relationships ever achieve, a world that belongs only to them. From the outside, very little may seem unusual. They don't necessarily seek attention. They aren't always the loudest couple in the room. They may even appear surprisingly ordinary to everyone else. But beneath the surface, a different relationship exists. One built on shared glances that require no explanation, conversations that continue late into the night, moments of silence that feel just as meaningful as words. Over time, they begin developing an understanding that is difficult for others to describe. The Scorpio woman often knows when something is weighing on the Scorpio man's mind before he says a single word. The Scorpio man senses when something has shifted within her, even when she insists that everything is fine. They have spent enough time paying attention to recognize the smallest changes in one another. That kind of understanding cannot be rushed. It is earned, little by little, year by year. This is one of the reasons Scorpio relationships are often misunderstood by people on the outside. Others may wonder why they remain so loyal to one another, why they forgive what others would walk away from, why they continue choosing each other after seeing both the light and the darkness. The answer is simple. Very few people ever make Scorpio feel completely seen. Fewer still make Scorpio feel accepted after being seen. When they find someone who offers both, the connection becomes incredibly difficult to replace. Both have witnessed the other's fears, flaws, mistakes, and scars. Neither is living under an illusion anymore. They know exactly who they are choosing, and they choose each other anyway. That kind of love doesn't always make sense to the outside world, but perhaps it was never meant to. Some relationships are understood by everyone. Others are understood only by the two people living them. The Scorpio woman and Scorpio man relationship often belongs to the second kind. Chapter 9, Destruction or Transformation. Every Scorpio relationship eventually arrives at the same question. Will we keep protecting ourselves, or will we finally trust what we've built together? No relationship can remain suspended between closeness and self-protection forever. Eventually, something has to give. For the Scorpio woman and Scorpio man, this is the moment that determines everything. If fear continues leading the relationship, the same patterns begin repeating themselves. Silence replaces conversation. Assumptions replace honesty. Walls rise where openness once existed. Both people become so focused on protecting their hearts that they slowly lose the very connection they were trying to preserve. Scorpio was never meant to remain the same. Of all the zodiac signs, Scorpio understands transformation better than any other. Its symbol has always represented death and rebirth, not as an ending, but as a willingness to shed what no longer serves. That truth applies to relationships as much as it applies to people. Sometimes what has to die isn't the relationship, it's the pride and suspicion, the need to always be the stronger one, the belief that vulnerability is weakness. When two Scorpios are willing to let those things go, the relationship stops becoming a battle between two guarded hearts. It becomes a partnership between two people who no longer feel the need to hide from one another. They begin speaking before resentment has time to grow, apologize without keeping score. They stop treating love as something that must constantly be tested. Instead, they begin treating it as something that must be protected. This is the transformation Scorpio is truly capable of, not changing who they are, but changing how they love. Because the greatest victory for Scorpio isn't finding someone worthy of their trust. It's becoming someone who is no longer ruled by the fear of losing it. And when two Scorpios reach that place together, their relationship is no longer built on survival, it is built on choice. Closing, the ones who finally understand. Long before they met each other, both had grown accustomed to being misunderstood. People admired their strength without recognizing the vulnerability beneath it. They respected their independence without realizing how fiercely they longed for genuine connection. They mistook silence for indifference, distance for disinterest, control for lack of feeling. Very few people ever looked closely enough to see what was really there. Then they met someone who did, not someone who tried to fix them, who demanded they become softer or simpler, just someone who understood why they had become who they were. There is something profoundly healing about being understood without first having to explain yourself. For two Scorpios, that experience is rare. It doesn't prevent every misunderstanding, and it certainly doesn't make the relationship effortless, but it changes something fundamental. It reminds both people that they no longer have to carry everything alone, that they no longer have to wonder whether their emotions are too much or whether their depth will eventually drive someone away. They have found someone who isn't intimidated by the complexity, who meets it with complexity of their own. Perhaps that is why this pairing leaves such a lasting impression. It asks two people to stop hiding from the very parts of themselves they have spent a lifetime protecting.